Hello good people of the internet, my name is Hexa and welcome back to my channel. We are a little bit past halfway through the year, so it is time to do my mid-year book review of all of the books that I've read so far this year and just how I'm doing with my reading goal. I've never made a video like this before because I don't consider myself such an intellectual and connoisseur of good books that I should be justified in reviewing books. But then I thought, you know what? Reading is supposed to be for fun and for pleasure and not for showing off how smart you are and what excellent taste you have. And I love talking about the books that I've been enjoying, and I think a lot of people love hearing about the books that other people are enjoying. So let's get into this video. This is not going to be one of those videos where I'm like, I have read 25 books so far this year and I am on track to meet my 50 books goal, which no judgment if that is you, but I am someone who has just recently started getting back into reading again. I used to love reading and I used to read a lot when I was in like middle school, and then in high school with all the required reading and endless papers and whatnot, I just completely lost the love for reading, and I am just now getting it back and slowly, painstakingly starting to choose books over Netflix. So if you're in the same boat, or you would like to be, you know, like you're also one of these people who wants to read more but always turns to watching stuff instead, hopefully this will be somehow motivational to you in knowing that like we're all in the same boat here and it's okay to not be one of these people who can like power through one book every week. So my goal for 2025 was to read 18 books. I am currently at 7, which is a little bit behind schedule, but considering the fact that last year I literally only read one single solitary book like from cover to cover, that is a major improvement and I am very proud of myself. I have been using for several years now a time tracking app in which I meticulously track how I spend / most of the time waste my time. And according to my time tracking app, I have spent 56 hours reading so far this year, which means there have been 56 hours during which I could have chosen Netflix but chose to read instead. So pat on the back for that. That averages out to about like 15 minutes of reading per day, which I would say is fair because like I mostly read just for a little while before bed. Sometimes a book really catches me and then I stay up late and I'll read for like a solid hour straight, and then there's been weeks where I just got out of like a good bedtime routine and wasn't reading before bed at all anymore. But you know, 15 minutes of reading, considering it's mostly like before bed just to like help me fall asleep or whatever, that's pretty solid. That's to be expected. Let's get into the books. I have most of them here with me physically. One of them is missing because my mom's reading it. The first book I read this year is the only nonfiction book I've read this year. I have a few more nonfiction that I've like started, but I haven't really read a lot of. But the first one is Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman. This book will make you hate capitalism. This book explores the concept of universal basic income and talks a lot about the history of that idea, the history of the concept of utopia. It goes into a lot of the universal basic income experiments that have been done over the years. It's an extremely exciting, extremely well-written book. It is clearly very passionately written and it will make you feel passionate about making the world a better place and finding a better way forward, and kind of just, I would say, quite angry at a lot of the broken systems that are currently making life in the modern world a lot more difficult and harmful and damaging both to people and the environment than it needs to be. There's a lot of knowledge and history and science and research packed into this book, presented in a way that is really exciting and not boring. Like typically I am not a person who can sit down and like read through freaking graphs and statistics. Like I have ADHD, I cannot read stuff like that, but this packs up some of that knowledge and presents it to you in a way that is easy to understand and digest and doesn't feel boring at all. This book will probably make you want to work less and shop less and consume less and be more creative and rethink a lot of the modern values that have been kind of pushed upon us as the way forward. It will encourage you to have more compassion for your fellow man and for yourself, and more rage against the machine of capitalism. Great book. Love it. Highly recommend. Moving on. So as I said, that was the only nonfiction book I've read. Everything else has been cozy fiction. Most of it involving some type of witchiness or like magical creatures. And I've been absolutely loving that. It is helping connect me to my inner child. It is connecting me with my inner cozy girl and my inner witchy girl. And I love that for me. I think for women especially, there's something about the idea of witchcraft and magic that connects with our divine feminine power. Not in a trad wife way, but in like a unhinged witch cursing the patriarchy kind of way. I don't know. The next book is Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood, who I believe is a bookstagrammer herself. Like, she was / is a content creator who makes content about reading and books and cozy reading corners and nooks, and she decided to write her own book. So this is her debut novel, as far as I know. It is. It says right here on the back, Rewitched is her debut novel. She has another one. I don't know if it's out yet. This book, first of all, look how stunning this cover is. I absolutely love this cover. I love these colors. It's so cute. It's so, just beautiful and so wonderfully cozy. This book is set in modern day London, I believe. It's London. If it's not London, it's like the suburbs of London, but it's somewhere in the UK. This is why I don't do book reviews, because I'm awful. I think it's in London, but it doesn't have that like busy, like inner city vibe. It's like cozy cobblestone streets, quiet, you know, autumnal vibes. Anyway, so it's set in the modern, like real world, and the main character of this book is a witch, and you know, witches are secret, but they live among humans. And she's coming up on her 30th birthday. Belladonna Blackthorn is her name. And the premise is that witches get their powers on their 15th birthday, and then on their 30th birthday they have like a confirmation where they're judged by a court of their fellow witches, like their coven, who gets to decide if they have been misusing their powers or not, and like whether or not they deserve to keep their powers. And she is a witch who has been neglecting her powers, has kind of been a little bit complacent in her life, not really where she would have wanted to be by the age of 30, which I think is very relatable for a lot of people. And the story follows her as she reconnects with her magical powers and kind of like retrains and relearns a lot of the magical practices. There is found family. There is a little bit of romance, a tiny hint of spice. I would have liked more spice in this book, like a teensy bit more spice, but there's just a little bit of spice. It's twisty. I think if you read more, maybe you can anticipate twists in books, but I have not been reading enough to anticipate twists, so the twists in this book actually really surprised me. Also, she works in a bookstore, which is like the dream, but she has a very shitty boss, which is obviously not the dream. The settings and scenes in this book are so beautifully described. Like, it's really immersive and it goes into a lot of detail in a really beautiful way. It feels very magical, very whimsical, very cozy. This was a solid 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. I would have liked a smidge more spice, but it's really wonderful. Like, she's connecting with her past self, like who she was as a child and a young woman. She is fixing the things in her life on the magical side and the non-magical side, and her relationships as well, and just like having more trust and faith in herself, rediscovering her power, being more decisive. Really beautiful story of just renewal and claiming back your power. Love this story. Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. Highly recommend. Also, best time of year to read this would be like September, October. I wanted to read this in September, October, but I think I had like other books that I had to read first, and I was like really slow with reading them, so I ended up reading it in the beginning of this year. Great autumnal read. Most of these I think are really great autumnal reads. I think it's just like by virtue of witchy themes being very autumnal coded. I don't know. Wata. The next book I read, I actually never finished. This is The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore by Laurie Gilmore, which is obviously a pen name that leans very heavily into the Gilmore Girls. I read the first book in this series, The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and it is like 1000% Gilmore Girls coded with like very half-baked, not very dramatic mystery and a lot of spice. It is like basically cozy smut with a smidge of a mystery subplot. And this book is no different. Like, that was what the Pumpkin Spice Cafe was like, and that is what the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore is also like. This story takes place towards the end of summer. I would say like, I don't know, July, August, towards August, September, I think. I stopped reading it about halfway through because it just had a little bit too much spice and not enough plot for me, which, no judgment if you like reading this kind of thing. There's a lot of stereotypes. It's very much like romance and sex written by women for women kind of vibe. I wouldn't even say that the spice scenes are that explicit. Again, I have not read a lot of smut, so I don't have much to compare it to. But there's a lot of sex scenes. And no judgment at all if that's your thing. For me, it just got a little bit like, okay, whatever, I get it. Like, I was starting to roll my eyes and just, I was a little bit over it at some point. These books are like solid 3s for me. I think the settings are really nice. The vibes are very cute and cozy. Some of the scenes are actually genuinely very beautifully described. If you love the Gilmore Girls, you will probably like these books. It's a little bit too unserious for me. I don't need the books that I read to be like super serious, but I need them to be a little bit more serious than this. This is just like like the plot and the story and everything is like written around the raunchy sex scenes. I actually kind of love that about these because they seem so innocent. Like, they seem so cutesy and innocent from the covers. Like, there's nothing about this book that would suggest to you that it is like packed full of sex scenes. It has a spicy books label. How could I miss that? So yeah, very spicy, kind of unserious. Sex and romance written by women for women. It could be a good time. A little bit, I was a little bit over it at some point. I think I will finish this book at some point just because I don't know. I can't stand not finishing a book, and I do actually think I will continue reading my way through this entire series because I'm curious to see what other like crazy raunchy love stories are gonna happen in this made up Gilmore Girls town. But yeah, this was like a 2.5 or 3 for me. Moving on. I think I need a little bit more light in here. Just a smidge more light. Okay. No, I think that was a smidge too much light. Never mind. The next book I read this year is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This book follows the story of Mika Moon, who is a witch. The story is set in the modern day world where witches are existing in secret among humans, and all witches are orphans. So as soon as a witch is born, her parents will mysteriously die. I actually can't remember if there are also male witches in this story. I think all of the witches might be women, which would be pretty cool. And Mika is raised by a fellow witch who kind of adopts her and very much promotes a policy of solitary living, that like witches should stay away from each other, should live solitary lives, not tell anybody that they are witches, and shouldn't spend time with other witches because magic is drawn to witches, and so the more witches there are together in one place, the more likely it is that the magic, like the concentration of magic, will become too potent and they'll get discovered. So being a witch in this story, in this world in which Mika Moon is living, is very lonely and kind of a very transient sort of lifestyle. Like, she's always moving from place to place and not really establishing any strong long-term connections. Also, this one is set in the UK. I can't remember where, but it has like a coastal kind of feel. It's set in Norfolk. I have been feeling very disoriented by reading books that are written by UK-based authors and in the UK, because I went to British school in primary school. I was taught by British people, and so I always feel like a little bit guilty that I don't understand UK geography and references better, and I always get very overwhelmed and confused by trying to imagine everybody talking with a British accent. But anyway, so without giving away too many spoilers, Mika Moon has lived a very solitary life until she is called in to help to take care of and train 3 young witches who are in the care of a bunch of humans who no longer have the capacity to protect them or control their magic. There is mystery, there is spice, it is very inclusive, and it's very much a story of found family and learning to trust and learning to connect with people and like kind of establishing a home for the very first time as somebody who hasn't had a home or a family. I thought the whole story was very beautiful. There's also a dog and some very unexpected twists again, which I really appreciated. Very cozy vibes, very cute, very whimsical and magical. Really, really funny. There were so many scenes in this book that made me laugh, and it was just overall a very good time. Another one which I would consider to be very autumnal. I think this is set in the period between like autumn heading towards winter. This was another 4.5 out of 5 for me. The next book I read this year is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, which I do not have with me because my mom's reading it. I think anybody who is a fan of The Devil Wears Prada was very probably drawn to this book because of the word cerulean in the title. I think it's a very beautiful title. Like, it really draws you in. Who doesn't love the sea, right? The House in the Cerulean Sea started off extremely boring, but I'll explain why in a minute. The House in the Cerulean Sea is set in modern times in a world in which magical creatures are living alongside humans, and humans are actually aware of the existence of magical creatures. And it definitely comes across a little bit like controversial because the government wants magical creatures to register as magical and like reveal themselves and their existence to the government. And there are some magical creatures, or well, magical people really, who choose not to and would rather not be known to the government. And there's a little bit of like a Big Brother kind of vibe around the whole thing. The story follows Linus Baker, who is a social worker working for the department in charge of magical youth. So his job is to visit orphanages that take care of magical children and kind of evaluate them for like whether the children are being properly cared for, if they're neglected, and just make reports about the safety and well-being of magical youth. And the feeling is very much like some of his time is spent at these orphanages visiting. Most of his time is spent just doing very boring office desk work. And I think that's why the book starts off so slow and so painfully boring, because it's trying to reflect that that is what his life is like. Very boring. He doesn't really have a lot of close relationships with anyone except his cat. He's lonely. He's been working this job for many years now and has just, again, like kind of gotten complacent with his existence until he is called to visit an orphanage. I think it's for a period of like a whole month that he's supposed to stay there. And this orphanage is special because the children that are at this orphanage are very special. And by the way, this story is also set in the UK. I think he's like living in London, but the orphanage is like on an island off the coast of like a little coastal tourist town. So he goes to this orphanage that's on this little island to stay there with the children and with the master of the orphanage for a whole month. And he's trying to remain objective and disconnected and like reserved and kind of be just level-headed like the good government employee that he's supposed to be. But of course he cannot help but form closer relationships with the children and with the master of the orphanage. And there's also another mysterious woman on the island who is helping to take care of the magical children and teach them and stuff. And as he's there for a longer time, like every week he has to travel back to the mainland to go to the post office and send off his reports to the department in charge of magical youth. And whenever he's in town, he starts to get an inkling of the fact that there's a lot of suspicion and prejudice and hatred towards the children and this orphanage by the people who are living in this small town. So the book really confronts that idea of prejudice and preconceived notions and fear of the unknown. The book has a very sweet, cozy, heartwarming kind of vibe. There's that theme of found family and, you know, allowing yourself to connect with other people. There's that idea of bureaucracy and like Linus Baker trying to do things the legal way, the way that the government wants him to, versus feeling like there's a better way forward and a more compassionate way forward, and how he kind of like struggles with that. This was another book that had so many scenes that were so funny and so well written that I literally had to laugh out loud. It's really nice following the main characters through this story as they learn to trust each other and to open up, and Linus Baker especially having had this very like structured, kind of boring life, allowing himself to open up to new possibilities and like have the courage to change his life and to let people into his life. I will say one downside was I feel like the climax of this story was just a little underwhelming, but I think that was just in the interest of keeping it PG and not too tragic and not too serious, and just it was a little cheesy. The whole climax was a little bit cheesy. There are definitely scenes in the story that make you very uncomfortable in terms of just like people being hateful for no reason, and the way that the magical children are being treated in this story is kind of just a reflection or speaks to the way that queer people are treated in the real world. It's confronting kind of, yeah, racism, sexism, homophobia, kind of like indirectly. It was a really beautiful book, very emotional, very funny. There's a sequel, which I really want to read, but I'm a little bit scared because I feel like the way the story ended was very perfect. So I hope that the way the story continues will also be perfect and not just like a sequel for the sake of a sequel. This was another 4 or 4.5 out of 5 for me. I do wish the climax was had a bit more kick to it. I think it would have been difficult to write a more punchy climax to this story without it being overly violent and unsympathetic towards the characters and maybe hit too close to home for minorities who have faced some similar scenarios in real life. The next book is The Only Purple House in Town by Anne Aguirre. This book hit super close to home because the main character, Iris Collins, I think is literally exactly 27 years old, which is my current age. She's broke and she doesn't have any money, and she's like can't afford to pay her roommates, and she's trying to start a creative business and it's not really going well. And she's like the black sheep of her family, and her family's always pressuring her to get her shit together and asking what's wrong with her and why isn't she successful yet. And I was like, oh my gosh, I relate to this so much. This story is set in St. Clair in the modern world, where magical people, magical creatures, and witches are living among humans and have recently made themselves known. Like, it started with the witches. The witches kind of came out of the closet basically and announced to the world that witches exist, and then like slowly all of the other magical people and magical creatures started to make themselves known as well. And Iris Collins comes from a family of energetic vampires, so they don't suck people's blood, but they like feed off of people's emotions, and she has no known powers. Like her mother and her sisters are all like very successful and very powerful, but she has no powers. So she's already the black sheep of the family for that reason, and then also all of her sisters have like very successful careers and whatnot, and she is just like trying to make it work with this creative business that is not working out. But her saving grace in the depths of financial despair and ruin she inherits a house from, I believe, a great aunt. And the story follows her as she starts to fix up this house and rent out the rooms to make a bit of extra money. And she's making friends and building relationships and connecting with people. And again, it's about found family, finding your path, finding a way forward, discovering yourself and your personal power, and there are unexpected twists. I forgot to mention, by the way, that the previous book, The House in the Cerulean Sea, was also like queer coded, and this is also queer coded. There's a lot of characters who are queer, including older characters who are queer, which I think is really cool. It's very inclusive in terms of the age of the characters and the different personalities. Romance also plays an important role in this story. I won't say too much about that. There isn't really a lot of spice, but romance does play a big part. A lot of the book is dedicated to like the fixer-upper kind of part of the story, like fixing up this old house that she inherits. So if you're into like home reno stuff, you're gonna love this. There were some parts of this book that I thought were a little bit too like cheesily written, a little bit too on the nose, but it was still very beautifully written and very like nicely described, like all of the different settings. There's also a very horrible, hateful, spiteful neighbor who we hate, and like a prominent hate group against magical creatures that's like kind of happening in the background of this story. So a lot of those like progressive, forward-thinking, woke elements play a big part in this book in a way which I think is important, though at times perhaps a little bit too on the nose. Things get very exciting and very cool towards the end of this book. Although there is a minor letdown, I feel like there's something that could have been explored more towards the end of this book that ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. Like, we didn't go into that, and it left me with a bit of curiosity. This book is a 4 out of 5 for me. It could be a 3.5, but I'll give it a 4. Overall, I think it's a really beautiful story. I think it's really nice. Sometimes it's a little too cheesy, but that's okay. Like, we can live with a little bit of cheesy. Okay, finally, we have Cackle by Rachel Harrison, which I am currently reading. I'm a little bit more than halfway through it so far. And so I can't give my full thoughts on this. This story follows Annie, who has recently turned 30 years old. Her long-term boyfriend has broken up with her, and she has been forced to leave New York City, where she's been living with him, because she can no longer afford to stay in New York City without like sharing the cost of rent and whatever with him. So she moves to this little town. I can't recall the name of the town, but I think it has kind of just like New England sort of vibes. Like a slice of small town heaven, right? One of those like cute little towns where everybody knows everybody and there's like a farmer's market and the whole shebang. So she moves to this little town and she's all broken up about this guy that she was dating for 10 years who just like spontaneously told her that he doesn't love her anymore. And she meets a woman named Sophie, who is like timeless and ageless and wise and beautiful and perfect and mystical and majestic and all that sort of stuff. Very mysterious. And Sophie kind of takes her in and takes care of her and gives her lots of advice and tries to encourage her to love herself and like shows her the ropes around her new town. Also, she's a teacher and she gets like a new job in the local high school, and the kids are really mean to her and a bunch of stuff goes down. Haven't finished this book yet, so I don't know how it's gonna end. I'm excited to find out, because so far there hasn't been like too much plot. There's been some isolated incidents. There's a general air of like mystery and mystique and like suspense, but I don't really know where it's headed. Very excited to find out. Clearly, like, okay, obviously, I don't think this is a spoiler, Sophie is like a witch, basically. I don't think that's a spoiler because you can tell, but it's like kind of mysterious. Is she a good witch or a bad witch? We don't really know. She's really nice to Annie, but the townspeople seem to be afraid of her, and we don't know if that's because there's actually something to be afraid of or if it's just like people's misogyny and like fear of a powerful woman. You know, we don't know. That's kind of the vibe so far. I'm very curious to see how this plays out, because so far there's not a lot of plot. I can't tell what it is building towards. It's just like Sophie and Annie hanging out a lot, and Sophie being wonderful and mysterious and very kind towards Annie, and Annie really liking Sophie but also being a little bit afraid of her. So we'll see how this goes. Anyways, that wraps it up. Those are all the books that I've read so far this year. 7 books, 7 months. So like a book a month. So like it could be better. I've got a couple like nonfiction ones that I've been working my way through very, very, very slowly, including one that my therapist recommended to me. So I should really probably get on reading that a little bit faster. If you have any recommendations for more witchy books, please send them my way, because I have been loving the witchy books and I'm struggling to see myself read anything that is not witchy and mystical. I am really getting into my own personal feminine, powerful, witchy vibes, and the kind of books that I've been reading have been really contributing and helping with that, and I love it. I also do want to read some of the series that are like really popular on Book Talk, like the Fourth Wing is one that I hear mentioned a lot, and A Court of Thorns and Roses. Is it a court or a crown? I think it's a court. A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't know. Everybody's been talking about those books and everybody seems obsessed, and I used to love reading fantasy because all of these, like most of what I've read has been like happening in the real world. I haven't been reading anything that's like happening in a different time or a different world, but I think I would enjoy that as well, because one of my favorite book series that I read as a kid was Aragon. I actually never finished Aragon because a friend of mine accidentally spoiled the last, like a big reveal from the last book for me, and then I never finished the last book of the Aragon series, but I should, because I absolutely loved Aragon so much. I haven't given this a star rating yet, but I don't think I can give it a star rating without finishing it, so that's fair, you know. But thank you so much for watching. I hope this was fun. Please leave me your recommendations for other books that you think I would enjoy based on these books, and let me know if you actually like me talking about books, because if you like it, I'll do it more, and if you hate it, then I'll crawl under a rock and die. That's a joke. I'll probably still post more bookish videos. I don't know. Books are awesome. I love it. I hope to write one day if I ever like learn how to construct a plot correctly, because I tried. I wrote like at least 10,000 words of a book, and then it was just going nowhere and I couldn't figure out how to make it go somewhere. And so I think I need to learn how to make my book go somewhere before I can actually write a book. But I would really like to write a book. That was like, being an author was one of my childhood dream jobs. My grandpa writes books. He has, I think, close to like 40 books published in Romanian. And so I have the writer bug in me, and I would like to express it. But I think I have some things that I need to learn before I can do that. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed, and stick around on this channel for more cozy, chaotic, and creative type of videos like this one. Bye!